Happy Tuesday. Today I'm going to talk about Chapter 17, and I'm going to use a project that I developed, and you can get the worksheets from Canvas where you got the link to this video. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through using this data in the handout to compare the three methods. There's three methods for allocating overhead in Chapter 17. There's the Plantwide method, which we've used already in Chapters 15 and 16. There is the Departmental method, which we used in Chapter 16 for process costing. And then there's activity-based costing, or ABC. Now, all three of these methods use really the same basic concept of taking the cost and dividing it by some sort of an allocation base and then applying it to the products. The only difference is when we go from plant-wide to departmental, we're going from one calculation to a calculation for each department. In this case, there's going to be 3 departments that will do it. But however many departments the company has based on their process, then we would do it that way. And then activity-based costing, again, same calculation, taking the cost and dividing it by a base, but now we're splitting it into different activities based on what's happening in our production facility. So let's start with the basic one, which is the plant-wide rate. Got a template here. I want to point out that it's really important that you get in the habit of putting a heading on everything that you do, particularly the problems, because we always want to know the company name. We always want to know the statement or the schedule or whatever it is that we're doing, and then we usually have a period of time that we're covering. So I've already added the heading here to save time on the video. But what I need to do now is first put in the cost of subassembly, which is a department, the finishing department, and the support department. So I've got 3 departments, and I'm going to add these together. And what this is it's my total overhead cost for the whole plant. I'm doing it based on machine hours, and you'll notice that I have defined machine hours as MH. So that's a very common thing that you can do, but you have to define it. You can't just use MH without telling the reader what MH stands for. And in this case, it stands for machine hours. Sometimes students will do AR. Well, AR may mean accounts receivable. Some people, it may mean something else. So that's why it's always important, if you're going to use an abbreviation, that you define what it is. So now what we've got here is $285.61 per machine hour. And we can put in, for our 2 products, the Bruin Smasher and the Irish Crusher, so there's 2,000 machine hours to make the Bruin Smasher, and there's 4,200 hours to make the Irish Crusher. You can tell I'm a USC fan, yeah? And then if we multiply the hours times the cost per machine hour, we'll get the total cost that has been allocated to these 2 products. It's still the same $1,770,000. And then if we divide it by the number of units, in other words, we're making 400 Bruin Smashers, and if we divide that, we get $1,428 of overhead per unit, or per Bruin Smasher, and we get $600 per unit for the Irish crusher. So from the facts given, we're selling the Bruin Smasher for $3,200. We're selling the Irish crusher for $2,200. So the Bruin Smasher, you can see, is our higher cost product, lower volume. We only make 400 units of that, but it sells for a higher price. So that's our more Cadillac product. And the Irish crusher is the lower end product. We sell 2,000 of those, higher volume, but at a lower price. We have direct materials of the Bruin Smasher of $1,000 and $800 for the Irish crusher. And then I can link in my overhead cost from my schedule. So that our total unit cost is the direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead is $24.28. The gross profit is $772, and then the gross profit percentage is going to be the gross profit divided by the selling price. And that gives us a gross profit of 24.1% for the Bruin Smasher and 36.4% for the Irish crusher. By the way, let me stop and illustrate a function I use all the time. It's the drag tool. What I want to do is copy these three formulas down here for the total unit cost, the gross profit, and the gross profit percentage from the Bruin Smasher column to the Irish crusher column. If I just move the cursor onto this little square on the lower right and then hold down the mouse key, the left mouse, and drag it over, and that will just fill that in. So I can go to my comparison, and I can link in the overhead cost, the overhead cost per unit, and the gross profit for both the Irish crusher and the Bruin Smasher. And we will do a comparison with the other methods. Now, I'm totaling up the overhead cost. Doesn't make sense to total up the gross profit and the overhead cost per unit, but I do want to total up the overhead cost because we're going to see in all three methods it's the exact same amount of money, $1,770,800. That's not going to change. So now let's move on to the departmental rate. The departmental, we're going to do in effect the same calculation. However, in this case, we're going to have to do it 3 times, and rather than use machine hours for everything, we're going to use machine hours for the sub-assembly department. We're going to use welding hours for the finishing department, and we're going to use purchase orders for the support department. So first step is to drop the cost in. I'll just link to my Plantwide totals. Same $1,770,000. And then I'm going to divide the cost by the allocation base. So it's $181 per machine hour for the sub-assembly department. And let's go ahead and add some pennies in this one. And I can also just drag it down. So I get 109.42 per welding hour in the finishing department, $511.11 per purchase order in the support department. And now, using that, I can link up, and again, I'm going to use pennies, and I can link up to my rate for both of my products, and then do the calculations. So the Bruin Smasher has 2,000 machine hours, same as what we did with the departmental or the plant-wide rate, 1,600 welding hours, and 300 purchase orders. 4,200 machine hours for the Irish crusher, 2,200 welding hours for the Irish crusher, and 150 purchase orders for the Irish crusher. And now when I multiply the base times the rate per machine hour times the rate per welding hour times the rate per purchase order, I can total it up, get the number of units, again 400, and I get $17.28 is the overhead cost per unit. So I'm going to stop the video and I'll do the calculations for the Irish crusher and fill in the gross profit numbers, and I'll be right back. You can do it. You can just pause the video and calculate the numbers yourself and then check it when I come back. Okay, I'm back, and through the magic of video, here is the completed schedule. Hopefully you got these same numbers. If not, pause the video and check your calculations. And by the way, it's the best way to learn is to try it and then compare. And then what I've done is I've linked it to the comparison sheet. And what do we see? We see that the Bruin Smasher, by using the departmental rate, has been allocated more overhead, almost $120,000 more, actually a little more than $120,000. And so therefore, the cost per unit went up and the gross profit went down on the Bruin Smasher, on our higher end, lower volume product. Irish crusher actually got more profitable. Because we shifted $120,000 away from the Irish crusher and to the Bruin Smasher, the overhead cost per unit went down $60 and the gross profit went up $60. So you could say this is more accurate than using the plant-wide rate. And the reason is primarily in the purchase orders. Because we're spending a lot of time doing purchase orders for the Bruin Smasher, there's 300 purchase orders to make 400 units. The Irish crusher, we're using 150 purchase orders to make 2,000 units. So for some reason, the Bruin Smasher is highly purchase order intense, and we maybe want to go ask some questions about why that's happening. Okay, so to take the next step is to go to activity-based costing. And I've got a sheet for activity-based costing labeled ABC. We're going to do the exact same thing, except Now we have, instead of one calculation in the Plantwide and 3 calculations in the Departmental, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and theoretically we should have 9, but because both space and utilities use square footage as their allocation base, we can pool these together. So the space is $45,000 and the utilities is $80,000. And when we add those together, we get $125,000, and there's our $1,770,800. Same exact costs. Now we're just categorizing it or breaking it into these 8 categories. So I've already calculated the cost per batch for changeover. We have 6,200 machine hours. That hasn't changed. We have 120 setups. We have 3,800 welding hours. That hasn't changed. We use that in our departmental calculation. Inspecting, we have 700 inspections. We have 400 reworks, 450 purchase orders. That hasn't changed. We use that in our departmental. And we have 5,000 square feet. So when we calculate the cost divided by the base, $56.45 per machine hour, but that's only for the machining category now, or activity, and I can use my drag tool and do these calculations. You should check them. You should, oh, actually, this doesn't make sense to total up because these are all individually calculated amounts. So go ahead and pause the video and check as many calculations as you want, and then come back. Okay, so we're ready to move on. And what we have to do now is allocate it between our 2 products, which is the Bruin Smasher and the Irish Crusher. So I'm multiplying the quantity of the base times my cost per base that I calculated up above. So for changeovers, the Bruin Smasher used 300 batches, and the Irish Crusher, we did 400 batches. Now I'm going to point out that Bruin Smasher is misspelled. I'll fix that. We're making 400 units of the Bruin Smasher in 300 batches. Well, that doesn't really make sense. We wouldn't make a partial, but nonetheless, these are the facts that I've got. So we're making basically the Bruin Smasher 1 at a time. We're making the Irish Crusher 5 at a time. That's what the batch concept is, right? So we're making the Bruin Smasher basically individually, and the Irish Crusher, we're making it in batches of 5. So I can drop these in, 2,000 machine hours, 80 setups, 1,600 welding hours, 400 inspections, 300 reworks, 300 purchase orders, and 3,000 square feet. Irish Crusher, 4,200 machine hours, 40 setups, 2,200 welding hours, 300 inspections, 100 rework orders, 150 purchase orders, and 2,000 square feet. So that when I calculate machine hours, let's try that again. Machine hours times the cost per machine hour, 112,903. And now I can use the drag tool and come straight down. I'm going to finish the Bruin Smasher by drawing a line. Anytime we do a math function, we need to draw a line. The total is 865,715. We made 400 units, so the overhead cost per unit for the Bruin Smasher is $2,164. We've got our Bruin Smasher and Irish Crusher over here. Selling price $3,200. The direct materials is still $1,000 given to you, but now the overhead is $2,164, which means the total unit cost, and let's take the pennies out. So gross profit is a whopping $36, and the gross profit percentage is a measly 1.1%. Okay, so I'll stop the video and fill in for the Irish Crusher. You can do this on your own, and I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. Hopefully you got $453 as the overhead cost per unit for the Irish Crusher. And we can see another big amount of cost, overhead cost, has shifted from the Irish Crusher to the Bruin Smasher, which means the Irish Crusher gross profit went up to $947, which is a 43%. So if we use activity-based costing, and the key point here is activity-based costing is more accurate. So what was happening with the plant-wide rate was not correct. Well, the main thing is these purchase orders, but you can look at all of these things. We're using a lot more welding hours to make the Bruin Smasher per unit. We're only making 400 units. That means it's about 4 hours of welding time to make one Bruin Smasher. It's a little more than 1 hour of welding time to make the Irish Crusher. We're using more money in setups. So all of this money has shifted from the Irish Crusher to the Bruin Smasher. Again, more accurate. And the bottom line is we may not be charging enough for the Bruin Smasher based on the process that it has to go through. It's our custom product. And if we go to the comparison, it's the same amount of overhead being applied here. All we're doing is changing the method from a very simple method to a little more complicated method to a very detailed method. Activity-based costing is going to give us more accurate information, and this could lead us to say we need to either quit making the Bruin Smasher because we're only making 36 bucks a piece, or we need to raise the price. And so that's Chapter 17 in a nutshell. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, and I'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.